This video was brought to you by Indently.io, learning Python made simple.
How's it going, everyone? In today's video, we're going to be exploring everything that you need to know about fstrings, so you won't have to go around watching random videos on YouTube, discovering a bunch of random tips and tricks for using them efficiently. And I've made many videos on fstrings, so I just thought that I would try to gather all of the features and put them all in one video. So you can kind of consider this to be an fstring masterclass. Anyway, to get started, let's familiarize ourselves with how an fstring actually works, or what it actually does. So first of all, I'm going to create a name of type string, which is going to be set to indently. And then we're going to type in that the age of type integer is going to be set to 69. Now, if we wanted to print this information together in a nice format, it would take a lot of editing, especially if we decide to not use the fstring. For example, if we want to print that the name is indently, we'd have to do name plus, using string concatenation, indently. And we would have to pay attention to the spaces. And then if we wanted also to print, let's say, the age, we'd have to add a comma, age, plus the string of age, because you cannot concatenate an integer with a string by itself. That will not work. So we need to do a lot of acrobatics to get this to actually display nicely. And if we were to run it, we would get something like this. And as you can see, I already messed up because the comma should be attached to indently. So what we're going to do now is just do that. And this is actually because I should have added a plus here. Anyway, now it displays nicely, but it took a lot of effort. So obviously fstrings were added to simplify this process, so we don't have to go through all this trouble to display basic information. So now we can just type in name with the name, comma, age with the age. And we can even change this up a bit. We can add this in parentheses. And now when we run this, we're going to get exactly what we wanted to output. Name of indently with the age of 69. And all we had to do here is add an f in front of our string. And Python will read that and understand that we want to insert indently there. And it doesn't even have to be a variable. You can actually enter any valid code and that will work just fine. So maybe after we can do 1 plus 1 equals 1 plus 1. As you can see, I entered an expression there and Python is going to accept this. And obviously we need to type in quick maths, so that the next time we run this, we will get that silly expression as an output. So that's the basic concept behind the fstring. Now let's dive into the tips and tricks, which will take your fstring game to the next level. Starting off, I'm going to be showing you one of the most powerful fstring features, and this is used for quick debugging. For example, imagine you have a variable, which will be of type integer, with the value of 100. Next, we're going to print the fstring of var equals, and that's all we're going to do. Now watch what happens when we run this code. We're going to get both the variable and its value as an output, which is really cool. I mean, that saved us the trouble from actually having to manually type out the variable name and assign it the actual value. I mean, we'll get the same output, but it was a lot easier just to type in var equals. And something else that's really cool about this is that it actually works with any expression. So here we can type in is instance var of type integer, and this will immediately give us the output along with that name. So we can actually see the result of that operation. And to simplify it, we can even do something such as 1 plus 1, so that the next time we run that, we will get 1 plus 1 equals 2. And another thing I want to mention is that if you put a space around the equals, those spaces will be maintained. So, I mean, you can format that however you like. You can even do 1 plus 1 with all these spaces, and it will maintain the spaces. I mean, PyCharm is going to complain that you shouldn't have these spaces around the equals, but you're more than welcome to do whatever you like. If you find this more readable, go for it. You're only going to be using this for quick debugging anyway. Moving on to the next feature, and this is one of my personal favorites, and it has to do with rounding. So first we're going to create a decimal number of type float, which is equal to 1234.5678. And we're going to create a percent of type float, which will be equal to 0.5678. So here we have 56.78% written in decimal form. But sometimes in our programs, we're not going to care about all of these trailing decimals. One of them will be more than enough. So something we can do in Python is create an fstring, pass in that decimal number, and use the following syntax to round the number. So here we can type in dot to f, which means we want to round this to 2 decimal places as a float. And when we run this on the decimal number, you'll see that we will only have 2 decimals left. And you can even do it for 1 or for 0 if you want to turn it into an integer. Or it's not going to turn into an integer, but it's going to become a whole number when we actually display it. But let's change that back to .2f. Then I'm going to duplicate that, change this to %, and then change the f to a %. Now watch what happens when we run this script. Our float from earlier, which we described to be a %, was actually converted into a % and rounded to 2 decimal places, which here you're not really going to notice because we only had 2 decimal places. But if we were to change this to 1% or 0.1%, you will see that it will round to 1 decimal place. Continuing with numbers, let's take a look at how we can format big numbers, such as this big number over here, which will have the creative name of big number of type integer. That's going to equal 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So 1 billion. And as you might have noticed, I'm using the underscore to format this number, or not really to format it right here, but as a visual guide so I could actually see what this number is. Python is going to ignore these underscores, and you can actually place them anywhere you want on the number. And when you print it, it's going to be displayed without the underscores. So it's just a visual guide for us. Anyway, pretend you have a big number, such as this big number over here. And next, we're going to print the f string of this big number. And what we're going to do is pass in an underscore. And this is going to act as a thousands separator, which means that when we run this, we're actually going to have those underscores for each 1,000. Even if we don't include the thousands here, using this syntax will give us the underscores as a separator. And using the underscore is actually quite weird, so for something more conventional, you might opt in to use the comma, and it's going to use it as a thousands separator. And unfortunately, these are the only 2 separators you can use with this f-string syntax, because where I live, we do not use the comma as a thousand separator. We actually use the dot, and the comma is used for decimals. So yeah, it kind of sucks that we can't change that, but it's still useful for quick debugging. Oh, and I forgot to mention that this can be combined with decimal numbers. So imagine you have a huge decimal number such as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 0.8, 9, 10. Now I know this trailing 0 is useless, but who cares? So we have a big number which is now a decimal. Right now, if we were to run this, you'll see that we're going to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.891. We're getting the full decimal. But maybe we don't care about those 3 significant numbers, and maybe we just want to return 1 from the decimal portion. Well, to do so, you can just type in dot, followed by the amount of decimal places you want to round it to. So here we can do 1f, as we did earlier, and when we run it, it's going to be rounded to 1 decimal place. All we had to do is combine it with the thousand separator, and it also works with the underscore, if that's what you want. Moving on, let's take a look at how we can use f-strings to simplify the process of formatting datetime objects. So first of all, we're going to import from datetime, date and time. Then we're going to get the current date and time. So we're going to create a variable called now of type date and time, and that's going to equal datetime.now. Next, we can print the f-string of our datetime object, followed by the date and time format specifier. So here, for example, we can pass in X. I don't know how many letters I just typed in, but I meant to type in X. And this is going to give me the date back in my current locale. So now I have 11/11/24. And if we duplicate this and replace the X with C, what you're going to get back is your current date and time in your locale, with the hours, the date, and the year. And finally, let's do something else, such as getting the current hour, minute, and second. So to do that, we're going to type in %h dot %m dot or colon, I don't know why I keep on saying dot, and %s. So that's going to give us back the hour, the minute, and the second. So it's really cool that we can use date and time format specifiers along with our datetime objects in f-strings. It just makes it so much easier to format the date and time. And I use this actually all the time. Up next, we're going to be covering something that I like to call a French string. Now, it's not French in any way, it's just that we use fr followed by quotation marks to use it. And I mean, theoretically, you can also do rf, but that's not so fun. I really prefer to use it as a French string. But at this point, you might also be asking, what is a raw string? Well, imagine you have some sort of string, which is going to be called text, because I'm very creative. Now inside here, imagine you have a lot of crazy text. I don't know, like text, \b, and some other things, \b or t. And imagine that you want this to be interpreted as actual text and not a / sequence. Well, using r in front of this string turns this into a raw string, which means that the escape sequences will be interpreted as normal text. Now imagine we have a user of type string, which is indently, and that we also have a path. Now, preferably you're going to be using something such as pathlib to create paths. But in some other cases where you're doing things quick and dirty, you might even opt in for a French string, because here we can do \user, insert the user, and we can add documents. As you can see, the backslashes were ignored because we defined this to be of type raw string. If we were to remove the r, it's going to give us this funky mess, and PyCharm is going to panic. So the r just tells PyCharm, or not PyCharm, but tells Python to ignore the escape sequences. And obviously with the f, we're able to insert our user variable. So that's the power of the French string. But again, in this example, I don't really recommend you do this for paths because there's a much better way to do this. Also, if you were to create a path like this and you add an escape character at the end, Python's not going to accept that. Personally, I think this is kind of buggy behavior because if you define something to be a raw string, it should really do it all the way to the end. But here it kind of thinks you want to escape that quotation mark. It's just the way things are. In Python 3.12, they introduced the concept of nested f-strings. Or actually, that's not true, but they introduced the concept of nested f-strings using the same quotation marks. For example, pretend you have some sort of f-string that calculates 1 + 1. And then inside here, you have another f-string that calculates 2 + 2. In Python versions prior to 3.12, this was not possible without changing the quotation marks to double quotation marks or vice versa inside your f-string. As of Python 3.12, we can do it using these same quotation marks over and over and over, which means inside here, we can add another f-string and we can do 3 + 3. And when we run this, we're going to get 246. Now this operation in itself was quite useless and quite complicated because obviously we could have done all of this with one f-string. Personally, I have no idea why you would ever want to nest an f-string in another f-string. All I know is that someday you might actually find the opportunity to do it, so it's good to know that you can do it if you want to do it. But this is not something you're going to be seeing that often when you use Python. Up next, we're going to take a look at how we can align elements in f-strings. And for this example, I'm going to create some text of type string, which is equal to indently. And with that, we're going to print the f-string of text, and we're going to add a symbol such as an underscore, a right arrow, and the total amount of characters that we want this text variable to occupy. And keep in mind that this is including the 8 characters that make up the word indently. So right now, if we were to run this, what we're going to get is a total of 20 characters with indently being pushed all the way to the right. And all of the empty spaces will be replaced with an underscore. And what's cool about this is that we can also do it using the up arrow and the left arrow. And just try to think about this in terms of gravity. The right arrow pushes indently all the way to the right, the up arrow pushes indently to the center, and the left arrow pushes indently all the way to the left. And the fill character will be used to fill the remaining empty space. So now when we run this, you'll see that indently was pushed to the right, pushed to the center, and then pushed all the way to the left. And you can use whatever symbol you want. You can add a bullet point if that's what you want, and it's going to work exactly the same way. Now, something else to mention is that you are not required to actually provide a fill element. You can also do it without that. And when you run it, it's going to work exactly the same way. Here, indently is being pushed to the right, then pushed to the center, then pushed all the way to the left. And for the last one, you might be wondering, what is this? I mean, what's the difference between doing this and just printing it normally? Well, to demonstrate that, I'm going to add a colon and type in "Hi Bob." And when we run this, you'll see that indently still occupies 20 spaces or 20 characters, which can be quite useful for formatting. Also, it's worth mentioning that the left align is actually the default, so you can just type in text:20 and it's going to work exactly the same way. But for the other two, you are required to actually specify that the element should be pushed to the right or centered. Anyway, let's remove this because I want to show you one last thing with this alignment feature. And this time we're going to use another symbol, which will be this symbol over here. I'm just going to copy and paste it for all three of them so that when we run this, we will get this output. What I wanted to show you now is that this does not have to be a hard-coded number. You can actually make this dynamic. So maybe you have an element, or not an element, a variable called n of type integer with the value of 14. Well, with this, you can actually add another pair of curly brackets and paste that in. So we're actually putting a variable inside here. And we can do that there, and we can do that there. So that the next time we run this, we can actually control it from a single spot. We won't have to update this for each string we used it in. We can change this even to, let's say, 30. And it will update throughout our entire project. So being able to insert a variable here is actually quite useful. Finally, I've saved the best for last, and that's how we can create our very own custom fstrings. And to do this, we're going to have to create a class called text, or you can call it whatever you want. I'm just going to call it text in this example. And text will take an initializer, which will take text as a string and return none. Then here we need to type in self.text is equal to text. Anyway, inside this class, we're going to create a dunder method called format. And that's going to take a format specifier, which will be of type string, and this will return a string. And the format specifier is the value that the user enters after the colon. So here what we can do is type in match format specifier, and we can create our very own cases. For example, we can create a case upper, and with case.upper, we can return self.text.upper. So we can actually uppercase our text. Then I'm just going to quickly add case underscore for everything else. And here I'm going to raise a value error that the format specifier, and then pass in the format specifier, does not exist. And this will be used in the event that we pass in a format specifier that we did not handle, or that we did not create. Anyway, at the moment we have one format specifier that we can use, so let's use it. And first of all, I'm going to create a variable called myText of type text, and that will equal the text of indently. Then we can print myText followed by our format specifier. So here we can type in upper, and the next time we run this, we're going to get indently uppercased using our very own format specifier. And adding other format specifiers is incredibly simple. You just need to add another case, such as lower, and then we can just return self.text.lower. And then we can add one more, which we're going to call count. And here we can return the string of self.text, or the length of self.text. So that the next time we use these, such as lower and length or count, we will get the appropriate outputs. Indently uppercased, indently lowercased, and the count of indently. And I guess it's worth mentioning that if we were to type in something such as XYZ, we will get a value error with the useful message that we have provided. The format specifier XYZ does not exist. Obviously, you can change this to whatever you want. I just recommend raising a value error because it's not something you intend the user to actually do. And it's very nice to be explicit with these messages so they don't just randomly try putting all of the random format specifiers that exist. But yeah, that just about covers everything that I wanted to talk about in today's video. Do let me know in the comment section down below whether you still have any questions regarding fstrings. I'll do my best to answer any questions I see. But otherwise, with all that being said, as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.